All right, everyone. If you can, hope you can hear me. Okay, cool, cool, cool. We just need to get that volume up. I'm just doing it through my phone. Okay, can someone speak?
Hello, hello.
That's on Zoom.
Can you hear me? Hello.
Is this where we go? Oh, wait a minute. I can hear now. They're getting it.
All right, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
All right. Cool, let's do it. Okay, so it's kind of the echo, that's fine. Okay. I see. I see. All right. All right. Well, we are still getting this figured out, but this is the land bank policy. All right, give us 1 second. All right, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome, 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 awesome. Okay, so everyone, welcome. I'm Commissioner Davis from Unified Government. We have our Land Bank Policy Review Committee here, Commissioner McKiernan, Commissioner Markley, and Commissioner Bynum to my left here. And so we are hybrid today, both online and in person, just to make sure that we are fully accessible. I'm going to hand it off to Judd Knapp just to give us a brief recap, and then we will get going for our conversations. If you have any comments, questions, anything regarding the Land Bank Policy Review process thus far, my contact information is up there, as well as Mr. Hand and Mr. Knapp. As well as a number that is there, and we will follow up with you to answer any questions or concerns. With that, I will hand it off to you, Mr. Knapp, to get started.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, a little previous recap, the last meeting, yard extensions.
We can't hear Judd now. Commissioner Markley, can you hear him?
Nope. Was good.
We're still working on this. Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. Everyone, I think we are good to go. Yes, this meeting is being recorded. Just very, very quick spiel. Everyone, thank you so much for bearing with us. We've tried to just manage this whole tech issue. So I'm Commissioner Davis. This is the Land Bank Policy Review Subcommittee. Mr. Knapp, if you can just start with the review briefly, and then we can get into the meat of it with the time we have left. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So this is a workflow. The one on the left is what I currently do. And the question I ask is the lot buildable? If it is yes, then we go for new construction on it. If it's no, it's for a yard extension. But the work we've done in this group has changed the questions I might ask to what do you want to do? Do you want like a yard extension, a garden, or new construction? So it's kind of like the brief overview of what we've done here. And then over our break, we're going to rewrite the policy to fit those workflow items into our policies. Then we're going to go into our first section of today is neighborhood context. We're going to go through pictures, public input, and have a little policy discussion at the end. The first one is the pictures that I'm provided that I present to you during our commission meetings and what is actually built are two vastly different things. The pictures do not match what is actually built. There's one at 5121 Washington Avenue. And this one is at 926 South Coy Street. So they're vastly different. So the question here is, the question we're going to ask is, do we keep requiring pictures or do we keep them? So.
Commissioner Markley.
But Jed, I mean, those people have to go through the same process as anybody who's building a home, right? So they may have ended up with something different than they gave the land bank, but they got all the required approvals and met the zoning requirements and everything else, right?
Yes, that is correct, Commissioner.
So maybe all we care about is that they go through our already existing process. We're not gonna turn somebody down. Or I don't think we would have legal standing to tell somebody they couldn't build a certain house on a land bank lot if that house met all of our other requirements. So I would say we don't need a picture. We just need them to meet the requirements we've already set out for what kind of house can be built in the neighborhood.
Commissioner McKiernan.
Great, thank you. I have said for a long time that it's kind of pointless to ask for pictures because they in no way resemble what actually gets built. They just get pulled off the internet somewhere. But the problem that's going to come up, I predict, and I'm surprised it hasn't already come up, is that a lot of the neighborhood groups and a lot of the neighbors are concerned about the look and feel of whatever's being built. Does it match the character of the neighborhood in which it's been built? And I'm thinking in particular of the one company that bought some land bank lots and they were going to build square with flat roofs. And the neighbors were thinking more of the typical gable roof of the surrounding houses. So, I mean, the current pictures, I think, are pointless. However, I do predict that at some point down the road, we're going to get concern from neighbors or neighborhood groups about the look and feel of what gets built.
I just think if they, I mean, if they're meeting all of our other requirements, I don't know that we can stop them from building. I don't think we can tell somebody you can't build that house there because we don't like the way it looks if we couldn't do that under other circumstances. I guess I'm saying we have to treat like properties alike legally. We can't necessarily say you can build this house 2 lots down because it's not a land bank lot and it meets all the requirements, but on this lot, there's a land bank lot. We're not gonna let you build that house because we have some other requirements. I don't think we can do that. I mean, some attorney who's more experienced in that real estate side and constitutional law side probably needs to answer that, but I think that would be a difficult argument to say 2 lots are next to each other. One's a land bank lot and one's not. We don't want you building this house in the land bank lot because we want it to have a peaked roof, but the lot next door can build exactly what the other lot is showing because it meets all of our other UG requirements.
I completely and 100% agree. But if you've seen the articles about some of the houses that have been built on the west side of Kansas City, Missouri lately, that argument has come up where neighbors complain that what has been built by recent developers doesn't match the historical look and feel. And one of the things that's been said to me, now I disagree with this, but one of the things that's been said to me is, look, I don't have any control over a privately held, privately owned, privately developed lot, but I'm a part owner of a land bank lot, and therefore I feel like I should have an outsized influence on what goes on there. So I'll just throw those out.
Yeah. I know staff may have some comments, but Commissioner Bynum wanted to give you, okay, awesome. Yeah, Mr. Henn.
Good. Can you finish those slides?
Okay.
Then we'll continue.
All right, so the next part is community feedback on the questions we asked. Should new homes enhance the neighborhood character? We got, we should incorporate tiny homes. We got, we need green infrastructure, focus on whole blocks, and basically, and then our policy discussion questions that Gunnar wants to get to. So.
Thanks, Jed. Gunnar Hand, Director of Planning and Design. I know we skipped around a little bit, but we already started this conversation, so I'll just dive right into it. I think this runs to the core of what you all want the land bank to be. At your last meeting, you denied a case because of how you thought it looked in a picture. You're already doing that thing you said you shouldn't do. When staff looks at this question and we see the neighborhood feedback that does have interest in the design of these, as the Commissioner McKiernan put it, they have buy-in because these are publicly owned properties. It really raises the broader question, which is, should the land bank only focus on and be concerned about its use? Does it want to get into the aesthetics of what these projects are? Or what I think staff would recommend, should we let all the other plans, zoning code, design guidelines, and other policies, which we're supposed to go through, and is the whole point of having an option to go through those things and let that process be that process? And that's our first question.
I want to, Commissioner Bynum, did you have?
Can you remind me what it was that we
It's the container, multifamily container across the street from 7th.
across the street from?
Across the street from the, quite frankly, the other policy that we discussed that was not adhered to at the last meeting, where the land bank held a large swath of land for a community development organization to develop at an undetermined time.
But I missed the container home was across the street from what?
There was a multifamily
Tremont project.
container construction proposal across the street from that held that was denied because of what it looked like in a picture that we're not 100% sure will become the actual design.
Okay.
Yeah. Commissioner Markley.
Thanks, Commissioner Davis. I think the difference is, and where I'm saying we fit into this process, those things came before us through the normal. I mean, if something comes before us through the normal process, that's fine. I'm not saying we're never going to say something doesn't look the way we want it to, Or that it doesn't meet the neighborhood character, or that doesn't meet our requirements. I'm just saying, if it's a house on a land bank lot, it goes through the same process as everybody else. If that process requires rezoning, or requires it to come before the planning commission, or requires it to come before the full commission through the planning commission, and there's discussion there, fine. But as far as I'm concerned, a land bank, a building on a land bank, or a house on a land bank lot should go through the exact same process as any other house. If it meets all of the requirements, it doesn't have to go through planning and zoning. When it gets built, doesn't have to have a special picture for land bank. It probably has to have plans elsewhere for our regular process. If it has to go through planning and zoning and it comes to us and there are discussions about it, that is still part of the normal process and not a separate land bank process.
Would it make sense if the land bank policy made a statement about how these projects need to meet the neighborhood character, but then lets the rest of the process determine what that is outside the land bank? Or does the land bank want to get into the business of its own design guidelines?
So you have something else, Commissioner Markley?
I was just gonna say, I'm a no on separate design guidelines, should go through the regular process as far as I'm concerned. If there's a statement that says, I mean, I think we can make a statement that says we want things to, look like the character of the neighborhood or enhance the character of the neighborhood. That's all just fluff. We can say that all we want. The reality is they're either going to meet the requirements or they're not.
Yeah, Commissioner McKiernan.
I mean, fundamentally, I agree with that, but we all know that neighbors and neighborhood groups are going to reach out to us and say, no, I'm a no. And if we're going to, we need to find a strategy for taking that into account and still moving forward in the way that we believe is best overall for the neighborhoods and for the city and county.
Thank you. Other comments, Commissioner Bynum? Yeah, I do not believe in the land bank that we should be in the business of neighborhood design. However, I go back and forth on that, because let's say we do no pictures, there still is going to be concerns on particular homes or developments that do not meet whatever said character. My question then, and Gunnar, you probably would know this, is in what way would planning and zoning satisfy this? Could, within planning and zoning, if someone was awarded a land bank parcel, could planning and zoning say, based upon the design that you have submitted, we are rejecting this particular application for variance or what have you? I'm just, how does the planning and zoning satisfy this? That's really my question.
I think, Gunnar Hand, Director of Planning and Design, I think that staff's recommendation is that the land bank can make a broad statement about the intent of neighborhood character and neighborhood design. The nitty gritty of that should be left to the neighborhood plans, the area plans, the zoning code, things like the narrow lot design guidelines, of which a pretty good chunk of the land bank parcels have to comply with already. The real issue is on the back end, which is all those examples that you saw, no one reviewed those except for building inspection. And the only thing building inspection reviews is, does it meet the building codes? It has nothing to do with what it looks like, where its driveway is, all those other things. And so I think there's better coordination that needs to be had between land bank process and the ultimate review process when you're just pulling a permit. But what I would say is, I think staff's recommendation is that the land bank should only be concerned about the use, a single family home or not, a garden or not, a multifamily building or not, a commercial building or not, an industrial building or not, and then let everything else that's already designed to review the character of that proposal, the design aesthetics of that proposal. And again, we don't really get too much into aesthetics anyway. if the neighborhood has an issue about the design of what's getting built in their communities, staff's opinion is that it's not to be had. That conversation is not had at Landbank. That conversation, those things, those tools that we may or may not have need to be designed and developed elsewhere.
So kind of to get this, Commissioner Davis, to your point. So currently, if neighborhood group just says that house is too big, like that's just that home is too big, right? From the land bank, we just looked at it from a yes or no. We said yes, that is, zoned for a single family. You're not backing your taxes. There's no code violations, all that stuff. Just from that house is too big perspective, what would be what body would be responsible for having that conversation? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
As long as, in that hypothetical, as long as that building met all the setbacks, height standards, other code requirements, then all it would need would be a building permit. If it needed a variance for, when you say size, that can mean a bunch of different things, but
Sure.
bulk, height, whatever, then there would be another public process through the option agreement that would allow us to have that conversation outside of land bank, right? So if someone says, I want to build a single family home, in staff's opinion, you should say yes or no to the use.
Mm-hmm.
And then you give them the option to figure out what they want to do. They either pull a building permit because they can build it as of right. Again, we've talked a lot about over the last couple months, the speed at which we encourage development to happen and not slowing it down. So as of right is a good thing. The issue then is, do our codes sufficiently address neighborhood character? My opinion is right now they do not. But I do not think it's the land bank's place to have that conversation. I think it gets way too, we have plenty of examples, again, as recently as your last meeting, where we've denied a proposed development based on what we think aesthetically of it, which I don't think is at the core mission of the land bank.
Yeah, Commissioner Bynum.
Commissioner Bynum, so in the process now, the place where we discuss neighborhood character is in the land bank process prior to its arrival at neighborhood and community development, because we notify the NBRs and neighborhood groups. And that's part of the way that they put their voice into the process. We've got a suggestion from one of the NBRs about how to enlarge that process when there is no registered neighborhood group. And so I'm throwing that into this part of the conversation because we do have that engagement at that level. I mean, that is where we take that kind of feedback, unless you think I'm wrong. And then once that feedback is obtained and comes to the committee, the standing committee, I would agree with you. Now, another question I have is these tend to, find their way onto a consent agenda at full commission. So rarely is there an opportunity for any further public discussion as far as transferring the lot. And if I'm tracking with what you are saying, we still might have a gap, because if we don't need a zoning change, then the opportunities for any further discussion of neighborhood character don't exist. Would you agree with that?
Gunnar Hand, Director of Planning and Design. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that as an example, though, I would just offer this, which is the Northeast area plan says that any development on a piece of land whose land use is, I can't remember the name of the category, but single family home, has to go through the narrow lot design guidelines, right? In the Prairie Delaware Piper area plan, there's a policy in there that says you cannot have more than a third of the frontage of your house be a garage. Go to Piper, Prairie Delaware Master Plan right now and tell me you can go find that house. I challenge you to do that. Almost every house that's built is all garage, all at the front. So we're not even following our own policy. Those are the back end problems that I think staff needs to fix. And then the Northeast Area Plan is kind of a workaround, because the only really thing that we have that provides design guidelines for single family homes is the narrow lot design guidelines. There is no other thing that can control it. You pull a permit to get a building permit. Again, it's reviewed for the building code, not for some design standard. And the building code, just like our zoning code, is designed to build suburban, automobile-oriented developments, which is not the neighborhood context where most of our land bank property is designed. So you get it from both angles. You get the person in the Northeast who wants to build a big suburban tract home. That's, in my opinion, nowhere near the character of the neighborhood. And then you get those who want to do the right thing and make it look like a shotgun or a bungalow or a old Victorian or what have you, using the narrow lot design guidelines. I guess our point here is, again, there's a much broader structural conversation, is what do you want the land bank to do? If you want it to be a design guideline review, then we should probably talk about creating design guidelines for our land bank. And then it becomes a totally different process that Judd cannot run.
I'm more interested. To me, one on the screen, if so, then should all other planning, zoning, and design guideline processes cover neighborhood context? I mean, again, I'm back to the gap.
Yeah.
And then, but the second question is what I think I'm hearing you say, advocating for the land bank policy should defer to the area plans, the codes, and the design guidelines.
Yeah, if the neighborhood has problems with what it looks like when it's built, we need to fix the code, we need
Right.
to fix the design guidelines, and we need to address it in area plans.
But
That doesn't
again,
move at the speed of the market. That's the problem. There will be
Right.
a gap between when this policy updated and when we get to all that stuff.
and again, right now I see a gap in neighborhood engagement piece, but we have built in that neighborhood piece into the land bank policy. It happens before those make their way to the standing committee.
And the way it works, let me just practically speaking. So currently I have Ms. McLaughlin sits in for planning at the staff review. When I was doing it, I would sit there, and every parcel that was a narrow lot, I would write that down, and then I'd send it to one of my staff members afterwards and say, go into Acela, which is the back end tracking system we have for all permits at the UG, and tag all of these parcels and say that this needs to have a narrow lot design guidelines review. Without getting too deep into it, there are plenty of lots that are narrow that don't go through the narrow lot design guideline reviews because we haven't figured it out on the back end, right? So I'm manually entering, these are all less than 50 feet. That's my trigger for building inspection to not give them a permit without going through us. If I didn't do that, it should be coming to me, but it rarely does come to planning for our review, right? So there's mechanics involved today that aren't really well. If we want to continue doing design, there are mechanics on the back end that need to be improved or addressed that, again, to be honest and frank, I don't see being fixed anytime soon.
Commissioner McKiernan.
I don't need an answer to this question, but I'll just throw it out. Based on the conversation that I'm hearing, my question would be, why do we need a land bank advisory board? And why do we need to do all of this public engagement ahead of time?
That's our next section.
Yeah, I think what would be ideal is solving where the comments and the concerns are about the design by our constituents somewhere. Not that everybody would get everything that they wanted, but that there would be a process by which we would be able to see what is being built and then evaluate it. But I guess that's another conversation then. I mean, I see the codes and the area plans, not necessarily a design conversation. I mean, it's the type of structures that are being built, not necessarily the color or the material that it's made out of. I don't even know if in our own comprehensive plan, like, what is the detail of design that we are actually addressing? So there's a lot of like other questions. My concern with this is the land bank is perhaps the only place that neighborhood folks can say, I'm not sure about this design. I do agree with no pictures. The pictures have not been helpful at all. Maybe we can ask a little bit more specific questions on design, but I don't know. And Wendy, maybe you can give some legal advice here. What legally can we bind awardees from the land bank to say this is how you should build your particular structure, right? Your home should be this color, the roof should look like this, it should have the, like, legally, what can we do in the state of Kansas?
This is Wendy with legal department. So I've been struggling with this for quite a while now that I've been involved with the land bank. To me, legally, I don't understand what the difference is between a private person buying a piece of land from another private person and being able to do whatever they want within the codes versus a private person buying a land bank lot and being able to do whatever they want in the codes. I don't understand why we're making a difference. I mean, I get that we want control because we control the property, but when it comes down to it, it bothers me that we are telling somebody exactly how we want them to build something, when if this was a private transaction between non-governmental entities, they could just do whatever they want as long as it met the code.
Commissioner Bynum.
It's a fair question, but for me, the answer is very philosophical
Mhm.
and has its roots deep in the disinvestment that has historically occurred in the community where the most of the land bank lots are situated. And so I think it's a deeper conversation. And I think it might be partly why when the land bank was originated, which was quite some time ago, 25 years or more, that we built the neighborhood voice into the process and have kind of maybe struggled with that ever since. But we were keeping that neighborhood voice at the table for a reason. Now that's, again, I think it's a very philosophical conversation that would need to be held. But to your point, it was a part of, the control issue. And I like control. I'm a big fan of it. But I did bristle a little bit when we said we're going to hold every parcel in the Northeast because we want control and we want to be in charge of who gets what. And I didn't care for that. I wasn't a fan. So I just think part of the answer to your question is rooted in history and, possibly is a broader conversation. And maybe speaks to, the whole reason why we're reviewing all these policies in the first place.
And then also, again, this is Wendy with legal. I think we often need to make sure we don't run afoul of any of the fair housing laws. And I worry sometimes when we get into, what are they going to do with it? What's it going to look like? What is the purpose? Things of that nature. I worry that we kind of get close to the line sometimes. That's why I think in my opinion, I think it would almost be better to just say, are you going to build a single family home, a multifamily home, commercial building, garden? I think that way we keep it to, and yes, we get neighborhood input, and then we bring that to the standing committee. By the way, Judd has it now where they can go in and make their comments. I think that's useful, but I think we need to be very careful when we look at things other than what is the purpose of this?
No, I'm the conversation around transitional housing and group homes, and which ironically, right, it's like there's redlining in this area. Now we are trying to recover from redlining, which I personally believe the feds just aren't doing enough. But then in response to that, it's almost possibly another discriminatory tool of saying, well, because we've been redlined, now we don't necessarily want this, right? It could be redlining in another way. So I do want us to find somewhere to land here in these questions, because they are very important and I think will inform the neighborhood input conversation. I am okay with I am okay with relegating this to planning, but the caveat would be we need something to address or some way to have input for the design. And whether that be working with the NRC and working with that process, to at the very least make them aware of the concerns of the neighborhood. That's just my perspective. Theoretically, and when you can correct me here, as long as the applicant is meeting, right, the standards of the code and everything else and in zoning, they could say, I'm going to build a 1-story home, 2-bed, 1-bath, come into a load of money and say it's actually going to be a 2-story home, 3-bed, 2-bath. And once we have said, here is your land bank parcel and here's your permit, there's nothing else we can do. Is that correct?
Yeah, in essence. Mhm.
So I guess that's the other thing I would encourage my colleagues to think about is, even if we were to put such stringent, restrictive, right, things in place, what we're really talking about is good faith, is that someone says that they're going to do what, you know, they told us they were going to do. But if they change their mind, even after we awarded them the parcel, there's not much recourse as long as they are following our codes and our zoning ordinances. Is that accurate?
Yep, this is Wendy with Legal Gain. That is accurate, but also that's the marketplace. That's private individuals transacting with other private individuals to buy land and develop it. As long as they meet our codes and as long as they do exactly what they're supposed to do under our ordinances, then we can't say anything else.
Yeah. So I think we probably need to think less, because I know we've had the conversation of control. We only have control over whether or not we give someone the land. We probably want to think more about influence and relationship building between the applicants and the neighborhoods by which they're seeking to develop in, as opposed to a paint it this color, do it that way. Because in reality, they can tell us one thing and do something completely different, and it wouldn't be against state, federal, or local law, as long as it, again, is abiding by our codes and by zoning.
If I may, as a stopgap, you could just say all single family homes east of 635 that are land bank have to go through the narrow lot design guideline review. It's an option we already have interpreted for the narrow lot design guidelines, whether you're a narrow lot or not, that you could do. Again, the narrow lot design guidelines currently is the only place where you can build an accessory dwelling unit. It's also the only place where you can actually do a duplex plus an ADU without a zone change. So if you wanted to think about that as a stopgap measure in your policy, I would think about two things. You're going through the budget process. We don't have the staff to do those reviews, A. And B, it would address sort of a broader concern about housing diversity as well as housing supply.
Yeah.
It's up to him.
No, that's a possibility. Give me 1 second.
Megan wants to talk.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not allowing comments at this time for the subcommittee, but there will be a time later on once we have a finished product for comments. But you can email us just for public comment, excuse me, but you can email us and we'll have those conversations offline. Yeah, so there was, my information is up there. Judd, can you go to, yeah. Yep. So you can email the three of us. Yep. Awesome. So yeah, it's I don't know, colleagues, where are we leaning? I think this is a tough situation to be in, where we have limited resources, limited staff, but obviously the desire to want to advocate and make sure that our neighborhoods have representation and that their voices are heard. Where's everybody at? Commissioner Ramirez really lucked out. He's doing parent-teacher conferences. That's all right. Yeah, Commissioner McKiernan.
What I'm hearing from this discussion is that the land bank should simply be in the process, be in the business of transferring land, period, end of discussion. And that if the applicant who acquires that land can follow all applicable building guidelines, then that's it. So correct me if I'm wrong on that, but what I'm hearing is that there really isn't much of a basis for having a land bank advisory board, a staff team, a commission land bank committee. It's just transfer the land. Maybe I'm hearing that wrong, but that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I don't know. Other perspectives?
You might be hearing that, but I would 100% disagree. We had a gentleman come visit us 4 or 5 years ago from Wyoming who was ready to take all of our land bank lots. And, you know, I had a real nice picture of what that was going to look like in the community. Hi, here I am, Steve from Wyoming. And you all that live here and are working so hard to build area plans and redevelop your own community, sorry, I cannot abide, cannot. Just an opinion. There's no way I can support a policy revision that eliminates the community's voice from the process. I just can't.
Yeah, I think for us to land, so I see it as two separate conversations, though. I don't necessarily think we are talking directly about whether or not we want a land bank advisory board. I think, and the only reason why is because there may be other useful information outside of neighborhood character that our neighborhoods and our constituents may provide commentary on that'll be very useful. I have found some of the comments and perspectives to be very useful, especially when we have applicants who have never been to our community, who are not familiar and who have not made an effort to reach out to that particular neighborhood for relationship building purposes. As I said before, I think we need to think about how to build relationships between the applicants of the land bank and the neighborhoods by which those parcels exist in. If we don't have the staff to necessarily enforce a neighborhood character, then we need to think about the relationship building piece. Perhaps we can let's go towards the land bank advisory board a conversation, and then maybe that influences where we land on here. Commissioner McKiernan, did you have a comment before we transition?
Oops. Turn my camera back on. Oh, there it is. So I agree with you. I think we should do our best to build relationships between people seeking to acquire land bank properties and the neighbors who are going to be around those properties and will live with whatever it is that gets built. I totally agree. But the tenor of the conversation I'm hearing is there's no point to that. Just transfer the land, and if they meet the guidelines, get out of the way. So I agree with Commissioner Bynum that there's a middle ground that I think we're going to have to find here. Because what I'm hearing suggests that somebody applies, we just give them the land. And I'm not sure that that's where our heads are with this process.
Yeah, appreciate that. I'm gonna hand it off to Mr. Knapp so that we can get going on this advisory conversation, and then hopefully that will influence and get us somewhere to land on this other conversation about neighborhood character and design. Mr. Knapp.
I would have to add to Commissioner McKiernan's comments. Just not like giving away. We're just not like giving away land. I mean, people have to come in and say, I want to build a single family home, or I want to build a duplex, or I want to build like a commercial space. We don't necessarily need a picture, but we can hold them to building a single family home, and we still make them get a building permit before we deed it over to them.
But couldn't you do that administratively without coming to the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee and going through all the land bank process?
Wendy's telling me no.
Okay.
This is Wendy from legal. Our state statutes require any decisions about what goes in the land bank and what goes out of the land bank to be made solely by the Land Bank Board of Trustees.
Which is technically us, just to be clear.
That is correct.
Correct.
Right,
Mhm.
okay.
Yes.
That is the 10 of us who commission a 5-member standing committee to do the grunt work ahead of time, and then we act as a full body of 10 at the end of one of our commission meetings every month. And I guess I would then just look for some direction from staff on what is it that we need to do to meet state statute. Because anyway, I'm sorry, I'm gonna be quiet.
Well, how about this? Let's transition over to the Land Bank Advisory Board, and then hopefully that can help us land somewhere. Judd.
All right, so now we're going to go into notifications.
I want to skip to advisory board.
You want to go?
Yeah, we can come back to notifications.
All right. All right, so we'll go to advisory board. All right, so we're going to go through what the state law says, what we currently do, what other land banks do, and then our current board participation, and then policy discussion. So I'm going to hand this over to Wendy. She'll take over the state law part.
This is Wendy with legal. So this is word for word what the statute says as far as having, and again, the statute doesn't call it an advisory board. It's just either a neighborhood or city advisory committee. It sets out that it should be persons living or owning property within the county, city, or neighborhood. It doesn't say which one you have to pick. If it's in a neighborhood advisory committee, then the county has to determine or the board needs to determine the boundaries of the neighborhood. But then this is also important: in the absence of a resolution provided by the board, it shall consist of not less than 5 nor more than 9. And right now, I don't know of any resolution we have concerning how our board is made up right now. So technically, we should have had a resolution. So in essence, again, the statute says may. So by law, we're not required to have any kind of advisory committee. We just always think that it was a good idea. So that's why it was done when it was first came into law. And again, we were the first county entity in the entire state to do this. But depending on how you all want it to be represented, you can do it however you want. We would just need to do a resolution stating how the board was going to be made up in the future. And then if you go to the next slide, Judd, if you wouldn't mind. So, and here's our policy currently. Again, we use the language may because that's what the statute says. And that's what we want it to do. We want the Land Bank Advisory Board to consult with the Land Bank manager. And it's solely in an advisory capacity. Again, that is because the statutes require that the only entity that can determine what goes in and what goes out is the Land Bank Board of Trustees.
Thank you, Wendy. I'll go over the membership, or what our policy is on who is on the Land Bank Advisory Board. It's a representative from each MBR, and then 2 representatives from the Livable Neighborhoods Task Force. So that's going to give us some total of 10. So what did other land banks do? Detroit, there's no advisory board there. KCMO, they have no advisory board. Little Rock, Arkansas, they have a community housing advisory board. It's not exactly the same. They're so basically, I found no others that have an advisory board. And I know Wendy just said it's state law that we have one.
No, it's state law. It says may
Okay.
make one. So technically under the state law, we don't have to have one.
And we're the biggest land bank in Kansas. So here's the participation that we have in our Land Bank Advisory Board. Now we communicate in several different ways. We have virtual meetings, and we usually have 2 to 6 participants. Those meetings are recorded, and we have our online survey that's on our Land Bank application, and then I do a lot of communication through email and then phone calls too. So it's kind of a summary of
Are these slides, can they be sent to us?
course
I
they can.
can't read that. I can't see it at all.
I can get them to you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
So is it showing me attendance at advisory board meetings?
Yes, it is. And I'm saying that not everyone attends those advisory board virtual meetings, but they also interact with me in different ways, like the online surveys and emails. So just because the attendance is only 2 to 6 people out of the 10, I communicate in other ways. Okay. So so this is a map of the MBRs and the land bank lots that are inside of them. All right, the comments that we received on this one is that the Northeast is underrepresented in the current Land Bank Advisory Board makeup. And you see that Groundworks NRG has 3,000 land bank lots within their territory, and CABA is the next one with 487.
And so I think Gunnar Hand, Director of Planning and Urban Design. And so if you start with state law and we don't have a resolution, if we want to change the composition of the board, of the advisory board, we're going to need a resolution. So our first question is, do you want to change how we currently do the advisory board? And then we have a lot of qualifier questions after that. If you want to keep moving on the status quo, we'll just keep doing that. Or do you think it needs to change?
Yeah, Commissioner Markley.
Well, it doesn't look like participation is super high. I'd be interested, it would be interesting to know, and I don't really want you to do this research, but it would be interesting to know, are people attending because there are lots of properties from their neighborhood one month, and the next month, maybe not so many, so they don't show up for that one. If that's the case, then maybe we need to figure out a way to involve people on a more neighborhood specific level. Rather than expecting them to come to every land bank meeting. I mean, let's say that I'm from Turner or Rosedale as a representative. We don't have as many lots maybe in those neighborhoods. Well, I know I don't mind. I think Rosedale is one of the lower ones as well. I mean, if they're not showing up because they don't have any lots that pertain to their neighborhood, that makes perfect sense, right? Why they don't want to necessarily be making decisions about somebody else's neighborhood. So I don't have a solution, but I think we may need to consider whether it makes more sense to find a way for people to weigh in on the lots that are of interest to them without necessarily expecting them to sit through a meeting where there are, 20 lots, only one of which is in their neighborhood, because that may be impacting the participation and limiting the number of people who are willing to sit through that meeting.
Commissioner Bynum.
Thanks. Commissioner Bynum here. I think Gunnar, I think we've had this attendance challenge across a whole variety of boards and commissions at the UG. I think sometimes even our planning and zoning board struggles to get a quorum. It's not a quorum, is it?
Landmarks Commission sometimes struggles with quorum, but it's happened once this year already.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true from my perspective. It seems like we're having challenges.
And I don't
At other
have
committees.
the answer to question one, but I'm certainly open to looking at the structure of the advisory board. And I mean, sometimes I feel like if you're on a committee where you're just experiencing frustration, maybe you don't go anymore. And I'm not saying that's the case, but I've had past experiences where I'm like, well, is my time really useful there? So I don't know the answer. I'm willing to look at the advisory board structure for sure.
So-
And then again, like you say, the goals, what would the goals be?
Well, and if I may, I guess the question that some of the questions that staff came up with were, do you think that the board needs to be crafted in a way that weights towards where land bank parcels are? Or do you think it needs to be something like you do with other committees where each commissioner and the mayor get a nomination, and then it's truly countywide? The thing that I think is important to also ask in this conversation is, and there's a bunch of different ways we could do it. It could be a revolving board. We could figure out ways to kind of rotate people in and out and stuff like that. The other, I think, important question here is there aren't a lot, but there are also some, the Wyandotte County Land Bank also serves the city of Bonner Springs and Edwardsville. And right now, they're really not represented based on the current structure. So if the commissioners appointed somebody, you could argue it is, but again, is that of value to have that when there's a baker's dozen in Bonner Springs and 3,000 in the Northeast? So equal, weighted.
Yeah. Commissioner Merkley.
So I don't sit on this set of standing committees, so Brian, do you take public comment at standing committee, right? On the land bank items that come before you, yeah?
Yeah, well, we do.
I mean, I guess I'm wondering, people are only going to be concerned about the land bank lots that are in their area, right? I am not going to show up at a meeting to protest a land bank lot, that's in Leavenworth Road Association's area. Not my neighborhood. I don't want to step on their toes. That's their decision, what they like or don't like, or want to protest or not protest. I guess I'm just wondering, what is this committee doing that wouldn't be done by just sending out the right communications and saying, this lot's in your neighborhood. It's going to be on the standing committee agenda on this day. Show up and talk about it if you want to. And it probably, I'm guessing some of these same people are doing that, are showing up at your meetings in addition to coming to this committee meeting. We're the board that's tasked with making the final decision. Them showing up and making comment to us is what we need to hear and what's valuable to us. I mean, I guess I come back to what Melissa said, although I think she meant it in a little different way. Like if people aren't feeling like they have a purpose in coming to the committee meeting, why are we hosting the committee meeting? Just have them show up at the standing committee and say what they want to say, and we get to hear it firsthand, and we get to incorporate that into our decision firsthand. And they only have to come on the nights where there are lots they want to talk about.
Commissioner McKiernan.
Thanks, Thanks, Commissioner Markley. I agree that would be a great way to do it. I guess based on where this conversation has gone in this meeting, my question would be if somebody showed up at Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee, on what basis would they give feedback regarding a land bank application if it fits design guidelines, if it fits zoning guidelines, if it fits all the technical characteristics of the law?
Yeah. No, thank you for that, Commissioner McKiernan. And I think, I mean, there can be certain situations or knowledge that we may not be purview to at that time, that maybe is not on the application. I cannot think of an example right now. When we were talking about this, myself and staff, during kind of the planning or agenda review for this committee, an idea that I threw around was kind of like with what is it, PET and the library board, right? I'm responsible for making an appointee from Edwardsville, right? Because that particular tax is only paid by a certain segment of our community. And therefore, even though my district is pretty far from Edwardsville, if each commissioner is going to make an appointee to that board, it has to be someone that's impacted. So if we're looking at it from a weighted perspective, my recommendation would be to weight it towards the Northeast, because that's where the overwhelming majority of land bank parcels reside in. Perhaps from a what is the purpose of the Land Bank Advisory Board perspective, we could say, you know, help the land bank applicants facilitate conversations with the neighborhood. Whatever area neighborhood that applicant is seeking to build in, it is the responsibility of the advisory board to facilitate that conversation and then report back on that from that conversation to the commission. That's work, but that would be the most, like, again, relationship building. We may not have kind of a hammer to say, you know, if you're not outside of our zoning laws or codes, it's going to be tough to put in more restriction anyway. That would be my perspective. And perhaps if we said the 10 or 11 of us, then it would be, you know, for the mayor, we would say you would have to appoint a Northeast resident. For the at-large commissioners, you also would have to appoint a Northeast resident. That would put it 4 to, you know, the 7. So that is an idea that would help. I think proportionally, that's still, if you were to do the math, it would still be off. We'd probably be at what, like 8-1, 8 or 8-3 or something like that. If we were to say the proportion, you know, amount of parcels as proportionate to your representation on the advisory board. But that's an idea. I like the idea of a rotating perspective as well. But I think that the purpose of the board itself probably needs to be figured out before we go ahead and change up the composition. But those two things, I think, could help solve both of those situations. Other perspectives and ideas?
Gunnar Hand, Director of Planning and Design. I would just add, regardless of which way we go, I think it's still staff's recommendation that the policy update should be accompanied by a resolution so that we are more in adherence with the state statute, right? Because if we read it, if I may, by the letter of the law, we're kind of already violating it, sort of, because we have more than 9 and no resolution. So I don't think it's the biggest deal right now, but it's just certainly something that will be another thing kind of that will come with the policy update, if that makes sense.
Thank you. If it were appointed by 10 commissioners and a mayor, as you suggest, you could say the 2 at-larges will appoint from. I mean, if you didn't say that, you still had the possibility that up to 5 of those appointments could be made in the groundwork or CABA area. So, that could be pretty powerful. And you could also maybe, your term will be 2 years and then you will rotate just to keep it sort of moving and somebody doesn't have a lifetime appointment.
And I don't think anybody, if you look at the previous year's data, those ratios haven't changed all that much in terms of where it's weighted, but if a rotating board was the direction, you could have kind of like an annual or a biannual census, if you will, right? And then reapportion based on where that is moving. You wouldn't want to, the point being is if you wanted to weight it, you wouldn't want to weight it in perpetuity. You want to have some level where you come back to it at some cadence to make sure that that was still appropriate weighting. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So weighted, and we'll come back with a recommendation.
I'm good with weighted if everybody else is good with weighted participation. Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead with weighted participation for recommendations. And it would be weighted currently heavily towards the Northeast area and Northeast representation.
All right, and I think this will bridge back if we go back to notifications, and then that should actually maybe tie it all together.
Yeah.
Depending on how we notify might impact the composition of the thing that reviews it, might also impact the process itself.
Yeah, the neighborhood character.
Neighborhood character.
I know we have about 5 minutes left because we had some tech issues, which we apologize for. And there was a meeting right before. So how about this? Can we go back to the neighborhood character slide in those questions? I just want to see how everyone is feeling and if kind of making that decision on the advisory board would now influence this particular conversation. Again, I think the best thing that we can hope for from a neighborhood voice perspective is relationship building with the applicants for the land bank parcels. I think that's the best that we probably want to look at. Everything else gets tough. Commissioner McKiernan?
Thank you. I just want to clarify in point number 2 here, should that be defer, DEFER?
Yes, typo, sorry.
Yeah, but good catch.
We could deter all other plans if you want, though. Put me out of a job.
That was a good catch. I looked at that and I was like, huh. Yeah.
I hate to drag us down a rabbit hole. What I'm trying to think of is a potential situation where, kind of like in our zoning rules, right? As you say, I bought my 40 acres, it's zoned, whatever, and I can do what I want. And I'm trying to picture what a situation like that might be that probably is not something compatible with the character of the neighborhood, where I hate to maybe build the policy around the one exception that could happen. But at the same time, it worries me that exception is out there and, totally ruins somebody's quality of life because we failed to account for it. I mean, my brain is going to things like a pig farm, but I don't know that the conditions exist for such a thing within the context of our land bank. I don't know.
I mean, our hand director of planning and design, again, I think that we have things like zoning that provide the protections that I believe you're speaking to.
Right, but I guess I'm speaking of a scenario where it's zoned for that. And it's sitting in the land bank and
Well,
it's
first and
10
foremost,
acres or whatever.
pigs aren't allowed in Wyandotte County.
Okay.
You got that going for you.
Okay.
Get that hypothetical out of your head.
I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's just kind of
Well, and again, I
hanging
think that
around in my brain.
maybe just in my own summary of the conversation today, if the focus of the land bank moved away from designing what someone builds on a land bank property and only focusing on what the proposed use of that property is, which again, we do allow for option agreements, so you can change the use, the underlying use of it, right? So that is a public process that gets caught up in it, right? So if I wanted to change a single family zone to a agricultural zone to raise chickens, you would have to go through a public process, not that is outside of the land bank. So we do have those sort of checks and balances. But if we were to refocus land bank to concentrate on what the proposed use is and not what it looked like, then we had an advisory board that was weighted to where these land bank properties are, as opposed to equally across the county, which it kind of is now, sort of, but not really, but kind of is now, at least in that direction from where that is now. And then we had another conversation, yet to have these slides, about how we notice that property. I think it addresses all the concerns, but it does dramatically change what we're doing at these meetings, right? Because it's just, do we want them to build a single family home or not? Do we want them to build a commercial development or not? We don't care that that commercial development is a bunch of shipping containers to do a thing, right? Because the use is commercial use in a commercial zone, right? So I think there's, I think the conversation is going in the direction I'm hearing you all say you want it to, but it's happening in like 4 different areas, but when taken as a whole, I think is getting us there.
Yeah.
Do you want to go longer, or do you guys have to go?
Yeah, no, I know. We need to get going, and very soon we're gonna have to set up for special session. So I want to thank everyone for attending. I think at the very least we landed on a recommendation for the advisory board and what that would look like. I do want us at some point to revisit the comments that we got from livable neighborhoods. And I know some of that was embedded in there, but just want to make sure we do that. As was stated before, because we have the budget coming up, and that is going to be a quite extensive task, we are taking at least a 2-month break. So for the month of June and the month of July, we will not meet. We will notice up a meeting for either August or September, depending upon what things are looking like for the budget, and then hopefully wrap up some of these very, very important conversations, because we are going to need time for the rest of our colleagues to weigh in on these recommendations that we have made. And so we'll see you all later on in the summer. Thank you so much, staff and commissioners, for your work. To the public, thank you so much for watching. And yeah, we'll see you in a few months. Have a good one. Bye-bye.